My mother-in-law tried to prove I was an unfit parent, so I proved she was an unfit grandmother instead. Dr. Mill documented my bad parenting for months to build custody case. My 3-year-old came home with suspicious injuries. I put a hidden camera in daughter's stuffed animal and caught Mill emotionally abusing her while planning to steal custody. Capture didn't just save my daughter, it exposed a decades-long pattern that destroyed multiple families. And my husband's unstable sister? She'd been telling the truth all along. This story is going to sound unbelievable, but I have court documents, video evidence, and psychological evaluations to back up every word. I'm sharing this because I want other parents to trust their instincts when something feels wrong, even when everyone else thinks a person is wonderful. It started when my 3-year-old daughter Emma came home from her weekend at Grandma Linda's house with a black eye. She fell down the stairs, Linda explained, with that fake concerned voice she used whenever she got caught doing something questionable. These things happen when children aren't properly supervised. The accusation was clear. I was a neglectful mother. My husband Jake immediately sided with his mother, like always. Emma's clumsy, you know that, he said dismissively. But Emma wasn't clumsy, and the bruise on her eye looked exactly like fingerprints. That night, I held Emma while she sobbed into my shoulder. Grandma said bad words when I spilled juice, she whispered. Then she grabbed my face really hard. My blood ran cold. The next morning, Linda called Jake at work. I'm concerned about Emma's safety, she said, loud enough for me to hear through the phone. Sarah seems overwhelmed. Maybe Emma should stay with us more often. Linda had been building a case against me for months, pointing out every scraped knee, every time Emma's hair wasn't perfectly brushed, every instance where I seemed stressed or distracted. What she didn't know was that I'd started documenting everything too. When Jake suggested Emma spend the entire summer with his parents, I knew Liz's plan was working. It would be good for her, he said. And you could use the break. That's when I realized my marriage was in serious trouble. But first, I had to protect my daughter. I made a decision that would change everything. The next Friday, instead of just dropping Emma off at Linda's house, I installed a hidden camera in Emma's favorite stuffed animal, a pink bear she took everywhere. The camera was tiny, undetectable, and would record everything for 12 hours. I dropped Emma off with my usual smile. Have fun with Grandma, sweetheart. Linda barely looked at me. We'll call if there are any problems, she said coldly. 12 hours later, I picked up Emma and her bear. She was quieter than usual, but Linda seemed pleased with herself. Emma was much better behaved today, she announced. She's learning proper discipline. That night, after Emma was asleep, I connected the camera to my laptop. What I saw made me physically sick. The rhyme started normally. Linda giving Emma lunch, playing with toys. But as soon as Emma spilled apple juice on her dress, Linda's demeanor changed completely. You stupid little brat, she hissed, grabbing Emma's arm so hard my daughter yelped. Just like your mother, clumsy and worthless. I watched in horror as Linda dragged Emma to the bathroom and forced her to stand in the corner for 2 hours. When Emma cried, Linda screamed at her to shut up. Nobody cares about your tears, Linda said. Your mother doesn't want you. That's why you're here. But the worst part came when Emma asked for water. Linda grabbed her by the shoulders and shook her. What did I tell you about asking for things? You get what I give you. Then she locked Emma in the guest bedroom for 3 hours. I could hear my daughter sobbing through the door, begging to come out. Please, Grandma, I'll be good, Emma's tiny voice pleaded. You should have thought of that before being such a brat, Linda replied through the door. When Emma wet herself from fear, Linda made her sit in the soiled clothes as punishment. This is what happens to bad girls, she said. Now you know how disgusting you are. I had to pause the video multiple times to compose myself. This woman had been alone with my daughter dozens of times over the past year. The footage was devastating, but I needed more than one incident to build a case that would protect Emma permanently. The next weekend, I sent another recording device, this time sewn into Emma's jacket. The results were even worse. Linda had invited her neighbor friend Margaret over, and they spent the afternoon critiquing everything about Emma while treating her like a science experiment. Look at her posture, Margaret said, sipping tea while Emma stood trembling in the center of the room. No discipline at home, obviously. Sarah doesn't know how to raise a child. That's why Emma needs to live here permanently, Linda agreed, circling Emma like a predator. They made Emma stand perfectly still in the center of the living room while they pointed out her flaws in excruciating detail. When Emma's arms got tired and she dropped them slightly, Linda slapped her hands with a wooden ruler she kept specifically for these sessions. We'll do this until you get it right, she said with cold satisfaction. Your mother never taught you proper behavior, but I will. They made her practice for over an hour. Every mistake earned a sharp slap or harsh criticism. I watched my daughter's spirit break a little more with each cruel comment. "I've been documenting everything," Linda said proudly, pulling out a thick folder. "Sarah's issues, her mood swings, Emma's constant injuries. The courts will see what kind of mother she really is." Margaret nodded approvingly. "You're doing the right thing. That child deserves a stable home with proper guidance." "Oh, she won't be with Sarah much longer," Linda replied smugly. "I'm building an airtight case. Soon Emma will be where she belongs, with people who know how to raise children properly." I found Linda's documentation the following week, when Jake asked me to pick up some papers from his parents' house for our taxes. Linda wasn't home, but Jake's father let me into the home office. "She keeps all her important files in here," he said, gesturing to a wall of filing cabinets. "Tax stuff should be in the family folder." There, in a manila folder labeled Emma's welfare, was everything. Photos of Emma's scraped knees with timestamps and detailed descriptions, a leather-bound journal documenting every time I seemed tired or distracted, screenshots of my social media posts that could be taken out of context, even photographs of our house taken from outside, with notes about inside, with notes about side, with notes about unsafe condition. Emma seemed embarrassed by her mother's behavior and sought comfort from other adults. Witnessed by multiple guests. I had one glass of wine and twisted my ankle in heels while carrying Emma's birthday cake. Katie, March 22nd, 8:15 a.m. Emma's clothes were wrinkled and mismatched, indicating neglect. Child appeared unkempt and tired, hair unbrushed, face unwashed. Sarah seemed irritated when I pointed out Emma's appearance. Ina had dressed herself that morning while I dealt with a work crisis, and I thought her creative outfit choices were adorable. The entries went on for pages, each one twisting normal parenting moments into evidence of my unfitness. At the bottom of the file was a business card for a family lawyer specializing in grandparents' rights, along with detailed notes about my supposed mental health issues. But there was more. I found a folder labeled Character References, filled with statements from people in our community. Linda had apparently been conducting a whisper campaign about my parenting for months, carefully planting seeds of doubt. Most damning was a folder labeled Professional Evaluation. Linda had somehow convinced Emma's preschool teacher to document concerning behaviors, though I suspected the teacher had no idea how her observations would be used. Emma exhibits anxiety around loud noises and unexpected touch. She apologizes excessively for normal childhood mistakes and seems fearful of authority figures. These behaviors have become more pronounced over the past few months. These were symptoms of abuse, but Linda was presenting them as evidence that I was the abuser, when in reality there were signs of Linda's own treatment of Emma. That night, I researched Linda's past, something I'd never bothered to do before marriage. What I found was illuminating and terrifying. 3 previous jobs as a nanny, all ending with mysterious disagreements with families. Most concerning, a sealed juvenile record for Jake's older sister Rachel, who I'd never met but who Linda claimed was unstable. When I asked Jake about his sister that evening, his face went pale. "Rachel doesn't talk to the family anymore," he said quietly. "Mom says she's unstable, had some kind of breakdown in college and blamed our family for everything." "What kind of breakdown?" I pressed. "She started saying crazy things about our childhood, making up stories about Mom being abusive. The therapist said she was having false memories." This sounded disturbingly familiar. I hired a private investigator to track down Rachel. Rachel was living across the country under her married name, working as a high school teacher with 2 well-adjusted children of her own. When I called her, there was a long silence after I introduced myself. "So you finally figured out what Linda really is," she said, her voice heavy with resignation. "I've been waiting for this call for years." Rachel agreed to meet me the following weekend. I flew to Portland with copies of my video evidence, desperate to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. Her story was heartbreaking and familiar. Rachel lived in a modest but warm house filled with her children's artwork and family photos. She was nothing like the unstable woman Linda had described. "She broke my arm when I was Emma's age," Rachel said, showing me medical records she'd kept in a safety deposit box for over 20 years. "Told everyone I fell off my bike." The doctor was suspicious. The break was consistent with someone grabbing and twisting, but Linda was so convincing. The pattern was clear. Linda had abused Jake and Rachel throughout their childhood, then convinced everyone she was the perfect mother when they struggled with the trauma. "The psychological abuse was worse than the physical," Rachel continued, her voice steady, but her hands shaking slightly. "She had me convinced I was crazy, that my memories couldn't be trusted. She'd do horrible things to me, then the next day, act like nothing had happened." Rachel provided me with detailed documentation of Linda's abuse pattern, including medical records and even a recording she'd secretly made of Linda berating her during a phone call years ago. Armed with Rachel's testimony and documentation, I returned home and confronted Jake directly. "Your mother is abusing Emma," I said, showing him the videos. He watched in stunned silence as Linda screamed at our daughter, locked her in rooms, and made cruel comments. I could see him struggling with cognitive dissonance, the loving mother he remembered fighting against the evidence in front of his eyes. "This isn't real," he whispered, his face pale. You edited this somehow. Mum would never. Call your sister, I said, handing him Rachel's phone number. The conversation lasted 3 hours. I could hear Rachel's voice through the phone, gentle but firm, walking Jake through memories he'd buried deep. When he hung up, he was sobbing like a broken child. I remember now, he said through his tears. I remember hiding in the closet when she'd lose her temper. I remember Rachel trying to protect me, taking the blame for things I did. The next morning, Jake called his mother with shaking hands. Emma won't be staying with you anymore, he said simply. Linda's reaction was immediate and explosive. How dare you keep my granddaughter from me, she screamed. You're both unfit parents. I have documentation proving it. I'll take that child away from you if it's the last thing I do. 2 days later, we received papers. Linda was filing for emergency custody, claiming Emma was in immediate danger from neglect and abuse at home. Her petition was a masterpiece of manipulation, filled with lies and twisted truths that painted me as a dangerous, unstable mother. The hearing was scheduled for the following week. I spent those days working with our lawyer, David Chen, a family attorney who specialized in defending against false allegations. This is more common than you'd think, he told me during our first meeting. Abusive grandparents often project their own behavior onto the parents they're trying to discredit. Most importantly, I arranged for Emma to be interviewed by Dr. Sarah Martinez, a child psychologist who specialized in abuse cases. The interview was heartbreaking. Emma drew pictures that no 3-year-old should be able to draw, images of fear and powerlessness that spoke to trauma beyond her years. The hearing was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. The courtroom was packed with Linda's supporters, people from her church, neighbors, family friends, who had no idea what she was really like behind closed doors. Linda arrived dressed in a conservative navy suit that made her look like the perfect grandmother. She testified tearfully about Emma's concerning behaviors and my obvious neglect, painting herself as a reluctant whistleblower. That child is crying out for help, she said, dabbing her eyes with practiced precision. She comes to my house anxious and fearful. When I try to comfort her, she flinches as if she's been hit. Her lawyer presented their evidence methodically. The photos, the documentation, character witnesses who testified to Linda's wonderful reputation. Then it was our turn. David Chen stood slowly and addressed the court with quiet confidence. Your Honor, we're here today because the petitioner has systematically abused her granddaughter while building a false case against the child's loving parents. What you're about to see will shock you, but it represents the truth about Linda Morrison. He played the first video. The courtroom went completely silent as Linda's real voice filled the room, harsh and cruel. You stupid little brat, just like your mother, clumsy and worthless. I watched Linda's face as her own words played back. For just a moment, her mask slipped, and I saw pure rage flash across her features before she composed herself again. We played clip after clip, Linda screaming at Emma, grabbing her roughly, locking her in rooms, making cruel comments. The contrast between the woman on the witness stand and the woman in the videos was jarring. Then Rachel took the stand. She testified about her childhood with calm composure, speaking clearly about decades of abuse while maintaining her dignity. She showed medical records spanning years, injuries that couldn't be explained by normal childhood accidents. My mother is very good at appearing concerned, Rachel said, looking directly at Linda. But behind closed doors, she's a predator who systematically targets the most vulnerable family members. The judge took a brief recess to review the evidence, then returned with a stern expression. This petition is not only denied in its entirety, but I'm issuing an immediate restraining order, he said, looking directly at Linda. Mrs. T. Linda Morrison is prohibited from any contact with a minor child for no less than 10 years. Then he looked back at Linda, whose face had transformed from white to red with barely contained rage. Your behavior as documented in these recordings constitutes clear evidence of systematic child abuse. I'm referring this case to the district attorney for immediate criminal prosecution. Linda couldn't contain herself any longer. She exploded out of her chair. This is ridiculous, she screamed. I'm the only one who truly cares about that child. These people have poisoned her against me. Ma'am, the judge said firmly, you will sit down and remain silent, or I will hold you in contempt of court. The judge continued, I've been on this bench for 15 years, and I've rarely seen such clear evidence of systematic child abuse disguised as concern. The petitioner's actions represent a danger, not just to this child, but potentially to other children in the community. Outside the courthouse, I handed copies of the videos to local news stations. Linda's carefully crafted reputation in our small town evaporated overnight. The story ran with the headline, Respected Grandmother Caught Abusing Toddler on Hidden Camera. Within hours, the story had spread to social media and been picked up by larger outlets. 3 other families came forward with their own stories about Linda's babysitting. Children who'd returned home upset or injured, explanations that hadn't quite made sense. The criminal case moved swiftly. With video evidence, Multiple witnesses and Linda's outburst in court. The district attorney had an airtight case. Linda pleaded guilty to child endangerment, filing false reports and perjury. She received 2 years in prison, followed by 5 years probation, 500 hours of community service, mandatory psychological counseling, and a permanent ban from working with children. Jake struggled deeply with the revelations about his mother, but he remained committed to protecting Emma and processing his own trauma. We started family counseling together, working with a therapist who specialized in generational abuse patterns. I spent my entire life believing her version of events, he said, during one particularly difficult session. She convinced me that Rachel was crazy, that my memories couldn't be trusted. Emma also started therapy specifically designed for young trauma survivors. Her progress was remarkable. The night terrors stopped within a month. She started laughing freely again, and the constant apologizing faded as she learned that making mistakes was normal. Grandma Linda was sick in her heart, Emma told me one day while we were coloring together. But you and Daddy keep me safe now. 6 months after the trial, we moved across the country for Jake's job transfer, a fresh start away from Linda's lingering influence. Emma thrived immediately in her new preschool, making friends easily and showing no signs of the anxiety that had characterized her behavior during the abuse period. 2 years later, Linda violated her restraining order by showing up at Emma's new school. A vigilant teacher spotted her lurking near the playground and immediately called police. She was arrested and charged with violating a protective order and attempted child abduction. This time there was no plea deal. She spent 8 months in jail. Jake and I eventually divorced 2 years after the trial. The trauma had damaged our relationship too deeply to repair, despite our best efforts in counseling. But we co-parent successfully, united in our commitment to Emma's well-being. Emma is 8 now, confident and happy. She participates in multiple activities, has close friendships, and shows no lasting effects from Linda's abuse. She doesn't remember much about her grandmother anymore, which is exactly how we wanted it. Sometimes people ask me if I feel guilty about destroying Linda's reputation and family relationships. I ain't, not even a little bit. She made her choices when she decided to hurt a defenseless child. I simply made sure everyone knew who she really was. The ripple effects went far beyond our immediate family. The state launched a comprehensive investigation into Linda's past employment and found a disturbing pattern of complaints that had been dismissed because of her reputation. New legislation was passed requiring enhanced background checks for private caregivers. Most importantly, Emma grew up knowing that she's valued and protected. She speaks up confidently when something bothers her, sets appropriate boundaries with adults, and knows she deserves kindness and respect from everyone in her life. Linda tried to break Emma's spirit and steal her identity as a loved, worthy child. Instead, she made Emma stronger and more resilient. Last month, Emma came home from school excited about a new friend whose grandmother had visited their class. Her grandma seems really nice, Emma said brightly. She brought homemade cookies for everyone and read us stories. She didn't yell at anybody or make mean faces. I'm grateful that Emma has positive examples of what healthy family relationships look like. She deserves grandparents who celebrate her achievements, encourage her dreams, and love her unconditionally. Emma still has one set of loving grandparents, my parents, who moved closer to us after everything happened. They shower her with appropriate affection and create the positive memories that every child deserves. Linda thought she could use my daughter as a weapon against me, positioning herself as the savior while painting me as an unfit mother. Instead, I used her own cruelty as a weapon against her. The truth was more powerful than all her lies and manipulation. Sometimes late at night, I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't trusted my instincts and installed that camera. How long would Linda's abuse have continued? The thought terrifies me, but I'm grateful every day that I acted when I did. Emma knows she's loved, protected, and valued exactly as she is. She knows that adults who truly care about children don't hurt them, manipulate them, or try to turn them against their parents. Most importantly, she's learned that her voice matters, that speaking up about uncomfortable situations is not only okay but necessary. That's a lesson worth all the pain we went through to learn it. And that's how I knew that protecting Emma was worth destroying Linda's entire facade of respectability. The truth always wins in the end. For those asking about current status, Emma is thriving in middle school now, involved in theater and student government. She's confident, empathetic, and has never once asked about her paternal grandmother. Jake and I maintain an excellent co-parenting relationship, and he's done tremendous work in therapy to break the cycle of abuse. Rachel and Jake have rebuilt their sibling relationship, and our kids are close cousins now. Linda completed her sentence and moved far away. We haven't heard from her in years, and that's exactly how we want it. To those saying I should have worked things out or given Linda another chance, child abuse is not a family disagreement to be resolved with conversation. When someone systematically harms your child while plotting to steal them from you, The only appropriate response is complete removal from your lives. Emma's safety was worth more than Linda's feelings or reputation. The most common question I get is, how did you know to record her? Honestly, it was pure maternal instinct. Emma's behavior changes, the suspicious injuries, Linda's increasingly aggressive comments about my parenting, something felt deeply wrong. I trusted that feeling even when everyone else thought Linda was wonderful. Trust your gut, parents. Your instincts exist for a reason.